ER nurses have read it. How often do all those "one more minute and I'd be dead" stories get exaggerated?
I am Doc here. I had a guy who came in after feeling weird in the chest all day. 40s, athletic, in the middle of a divorce, stressed. EKG looked okay. I see nonspecific chest pain all day long, and it's usually heartburn or stress or asthma or a strained rib muscle, and I was so close to sending him out with some Malox, but there was something about this guy that made me send him to the ED. I asked if he wanted a wheelchair escort, and he said no, he'd walk. It was about 200 feet. Anyway, an hour later, I logged back into his chart to see how things were going in the ED, and the first thing I see is a code note. He'd made it to the ED, gallons of blood drawn, had turned out to be having a mild heart attack, and while the doc was delivering the news and explaining next steps, he'd had a cardiac arrest. They got him back immediately since having your arrest in an ED in front of emergency physicians is kind of a best-case scenario. When I saw him again a week later, he was doing great, but told me that he'd almost gone to get some food, it was lunchtime, before going to the ED, but decided against it. If he'd waited, he'd had his arrest in a Jimmy John's, and things probably would not have gone so well for him. Anyway, almost 20 years of practice, and that's my closest call.
One story that I'll never forget is a family of 6, 2 parents, 2 kids, and 2 grandparents staying over, who saved themselves from a collective carbon monoxide poisoning by sheer muck. Everybody was asleep. The mom got up to pee and fainted on her way back to bed. The sound of her fall woke her husband up, who checked on her and called an ambulance. The first responder CO detectors went off upon arrival, and they evacuated everyone. If she didn't have to pee, they'd be all dead. If she just made a few more steps and reached her bed without fainting, they'd be all dead. If the husband had a heavier sleep and didn't hear her fall, they'd all be dead. If they thought the fainting was nothing and she'd see a doctor the next day, they'd be all dead. Instead, I had them all in the ER, casually recovering from a moderate poisoning, chatting casually about this unusual night they were having, completely oblivious to how close they all got to make the local news the next day. It was eerie.
Emergency call taker here. Most recent was a small child choking on some food. The ambulance my colleague sat was 10 minutes away. The helicopter, 15. While I was giving first aid instructions to the parents, my colleague called the local family doctor, who, in a stroke of luck, took a last glance at his phone before he would have gone for a run where he would have left it at home. He was there within a minute and managed to dislodge the stuck food.
I recently had a patient carried in by her dad that was peri-arrest from anaphylaxis. Dad was uncomfortable using her EpiPen and thought he was close enough to the hospital to drive in instead of calling 911. She had weak central pulses, no peripheral pulses, and her BP was 50s over 30s on arrival. She was minutes away from a bad outcome potentially. We did a lot of education, and she ended up okay. If you have an EpiPen, know how to use it. Edit, the dad was well-intentioned, appropriately worried when he arrived, and cared for her lovingly at her bedside as she recovered. This wasn't meant to shame him. Emergencies look different for everyone, and allergies evolve quickly. She probably was not that bad when he decided to get in the car, and it's not always easy to know how bad something will get. But he got her to us just in time, which was what OP was asking about. To answer the prompt, there are very few of those cases, which is why this one came to mind. She was safe, and Dad learned a lot, so everyone won.
A couple of years ago, I had a 13-year-old boy come in one time after a skateboarding accident who had a sizable epidural hematoma, but was neurologically fine. Hospital I was at did not have a pediatric ICU, and I'm not a pediatric neurosurgeon, so was arranging for a helicopter transfer. As that was brewing, he went comatose and blew a pupil, so I took him to the OR for a crani and evac, then straight to CT to confirm no recollection, then helicopter to hospital with peds ICU. He walked out the hospital 2 days later. Just the nature of epidural hematomas. If he had blown a pupil in the helo, not insignificant chance he would have had permanent injury or been dead on arrival.
I exaggerated one once, on purpose, and it saved my father's life. He woke up one morning feeling weird. No pain, no dizziness, just a consistent feeling of strangeness in his chest and stomach. He said it almost felt like indigestion.
After drinking some water and the feeling not going away, he asked me to drive him to an urgent care facility. About halfway there, he says to me that he was starting to feel dizzy and he was getting tunnel vision. I knew he had a history of heart disease, so I made the decision to go to the ER instead. As I walk into the ER, the nurse at the desk tells me to take a seat and she'll call me when she's ready. There was already someone checking in at the desk and a line of people behind them. I knew that explaining the situation would take too long, so I pushed the person out of the way and told the nurse that my dad couldn't breathe. That got him rushed past the line and into an open room, where he was found to be having a heart attack. 2 IVs, a crash cart, and a defibrillator. He was stable. He was moved to another facility where he had open heart surgery and has since made a full recovery. The doctor told me that it was already a razor-thin margin that he made it, and had I taken the time to wait in line or try to make the nurse understand the whole story, he wouldn't have survived.
Thanks for watching. Have you ever had a situation where 1 minute made all the difference? Write in the comments.